Lucy. Thanks for being with us today.
Happy to be here.
So can you tell us a little bit about you and your work?
So I never went to film school. I guess I would call productions, I entitled documentary, because when I came out in the 80s, a lot of people who were dying of AIDS, their families were embarrassed that they were gay or that they died of AIDS. And so a project I sort of took on myself because of an aunt in my family who didn't exist anymore because there was no photos of her. I began this project of trying to take pictures of people in the way that they lived when they got their diagnosis. And, that was kind of a dangerous thing to do. No photos at bars, and people at that time weren't out. So with the permission of the person, I would go to parties and take pictures of the people and then give the person in the picture that record of themselves. And that grew into me once I was able to check a video camera, one of those big World War II radios, video cameras. Then I started making video records of parties, and then somehow I wanted to start to make sort of fictional and narrative things. So that's kind of how I got into it. But never film school, just sort of me and a bunch of my friends kind of goofing around.
Yeah, that's what I've been hearing quite a lot from filmmakers talking at the festival, and myself included actually, about not going to film school because you don't have to go to film school to make films, which, especially obviously with all the different equipment and devices that we have these days, people can make films with can make films with their phones. So difficulties are different, but they're still there. So your work started as obviously you've moved on quite a lot, because when I think about Carol, which is the animation that we're screening, that's a parody of a very famous film.
Yes.
But so going from what you started doing in the 80s to Carol, so what happened along the way? I want to find out more about your work, because I have checked your website, of course, and you have done so much. You've got such a great body of work that I want our audience to find out as much as possible about what you've done.
Well, thank you. I guess, even with, back in the, during the years of AIDS, and even now, I think that, as you said, people with phones and iMovie can make, their own productions. But I guess I've been very interested in working class people and people who aren't often the topics of the films that are being made. Maybe they're a topic in a documentary, but as far as working class people making mistakes and having sex and and also those movies I wasn't really seeing around. There's kind of an L word, LA sort of gloss to a lot of lesbian films that didn't really reflect the lives that my club and friends and I were doing. And also maybe it's kind of through my work, as I'm looking at it, I'm oh wow, but a lot of times it looks like gay people are these pods that sort of dropped into queer community. And my life then and now has been very, very much happily entwined with my family. And I don't see a lot of queer movies that are showing a queer person with their family, with siblings, or with aging parents. And so my culture is an immigrant Irish American family, and so things are really about family and family relationships in a particular place. And but I don't watch every queer film, but the ones that I tended to see seem to have queer community as sort of this the only axis of their life is around their sexuality or gender expression, and they weren't involved in the families where they came from, their straight relatives and straight families. So I've kind of been interested in sort of, thinking about those stories and telling those stories, which in my experience I hadn't seen much. So.
And you mentioned an aunt, and so am I right in thinking that, because I have seen a few of your animations, is that the animation that you were talking about?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that one?
Well, So, living in this town with all of my relatives all around, my mom would take my siblings and I to this aunt, and we would go, and it seemed like once or twice a year there would be a new aunt living with our aunt. And so when you're little, like, everything's just as weird, you know. Like, my cousin had his arm cut off in a shipbuilding accident, and my other uncle had his leg blown off in Vietnam. So the strangeness of my aunt's life was as equally strange as any adjective for anyone in my family. We're a bunch of strange people. So it wasn't until I came out to my mom that she said, "Oh, I don't want you to be sad and lonely as an adult. Don't you remember our Aunt Mame?" And it wasn't until then that I realized that's the weird thing supposedly about her, was that she, you know, was in and out of different relationships as an older person. And so that story was kind of about my mom's worry, concern for me being an older person alone, when actually, as my mom now is older, I, as her, you know, queer daughter, am taking care of her. So it was just sort of this intergenerational story about care that I hadn't seen. So I thought, well, I'll just make it.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm glad you did, because there's a lot of humor in it, but it's also very poignant.
Thank you. That's nice to hear. Thank you.
And so moving to Carol, what made you decide to make a parody of Carol? I'm so glad you did, but I'm really interested in why did you choose Carol out of all the films?
I guess, I've always been making fun of shit. It's kind of like my way. And when I saw that movie sort of late in its theatrical, in the movie house. And by that time, so many people I knew were like gushing about how fantastic this, you know, Todd Haynes movie was. And when I saw it, to me, it looked like a story of a sexual predator.
Wow, that's a strong statement.
Yeah, it seemed like a story of a very rich person, you know, preying upon a poor working person. And I didn't really understand, like, what was so fantastic about that. And in my mind, I was substituting, if a rich white guy had saw someone at a store and then, like, taken her away with a gun to the Midwest and then abandoning her, that movie would, I don't know, I wouldn't think that was the best top 10 movie of all time. So, and it's rather than just, like, complain about it, I just thought, well, we're just going to have to remake that, which is, you know, don't complain, fix it. So in my way, I tried to fix it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It was just so brilliant to actually, instead of hearing, obviously, like, you know, you've talked about it very eloquently, and I was thinking, wow, I never thought that out of Carol, but it's obviously a very interesting interpretation. But actually, watching your interpretation, it was brilliant. It was so clever. And again, I thought, wow, okay, yeah, this is wrong. So that was great. But why did you choose Fisher-Price? And I know this is a recurring thing in your animations, but I'm not sure if I can actually say the name of the brand, but I've said it now. So yeah.
Those little people, those little wooden people. Well, a couple of reasons. One is, I think the big one is I happen to have them around. You know, so they're small, they're easy. I happen to have them around, which is probably the number one reason. I'm like, I need to make something with something. Oh, look, like, I'll use this. Again, because I'm making these on my kitchen table, or that one, you know, on the kitchen table when I had to be quiet because my mom is sleeping. But another thing I think that's interesting about that is the story isn't about the acting. The story is about this narrative arc of a powerful person, you know, using and then abandoning a poorer person. I like that. I as a person who likes film, I like to be asked a little bit of something in the film, and so having these creatures who maintain this sort of neutral, happy look on their face, you know, as a woman is being taken away from her boyfriend, you know, the viewer in a way is kind of asked, well, is that the appropriate response? Like, you know, like, I kind of like to ask the viewer to think about what would be the appropriate response. What response are you having? What are you projecting onto these creatures? I kind of like playing with that kind of thing.
Yeah, it definitely gets you thinking. Absolutely. And so, how long does it take to make an animation like Carol?
I pride myself on the sets. So I'll take whatever time it needs to till I feel like I've like created the atmosphere for these figures to be believable. But it's like thinking about it. I usually like think about things and like draw like little screenplays in a little notebook that I keep, and so that when I go to shoot, because I don't like computers and I don't like editing, so in my sketches I try to do everything in the camera. So like if I know that the car is going to have to drive by a building, I need to make the set and the car so that I can just drive the car by the building instead of having to do anything in the edit. So depending on how many locations are in the film, it can take maybe a month. Wow. I don't know if that sounds short or long, but maybe a month, I think.
Wow, because you do pretty much everything or almost everything yourself, don't you? From your first idea to putting it together, filming, and you say editing as well. You do, even though you don't like it. Do you do any editing, or you shoot one scene and that's it, and then put it together?
Well, I try to shoot in the order that I'll use them. So I try to, and then I just throw them in iMovie, and then so in iMovie I'm just sort of like sharpening the ends and the beginnings of things, or maybe putting them in order. But I don't really do too much in the edit. I try to get things, bright and still. I shoot them. I use a phone. I use a phone that I'm not using like as my phone anymore. So yeah, I'd say about a month. I just finished a film now that I've been thinking about for 4 months, and that's probably the longest I've like thought about how to do a film. But yeah, I want the sets to look good.
Yeah, and like the beauty of, of course, in filmmaking, a lot of the time you need a team with you and you need to collaborate. But the beauty of doing it all yourself is that it's on your own terms, it's in your own time, and if you want to spend 15, 20 hours non-stop doing it, then there's no one to stop you.
Well, in the case of most of my movies, I've been taking care of my mom, and so I haven't been able to ask for help. Like I've had to be very quiet. I've had to be in her apartment, working quietly at the kitchen table. So ultimately, I wonder what it would be like to work with others, but just because of mom's situation, I haven't been able to.
What it shows, though, is that you don't need a massive budget to make a great short. You just need to be resourceful and think on your feet and think outside the box. Yeah. Do you have plans for any more parodies?
I do.
Good.
I would like to remake the movie Top Gun, which I believe is also sort of in production. I'd like to remake the movie Top Gun, but to have Tom have a fleet of lesbian vampires that attack Tom Cruise's airplane at every opportunity and have him die in some sort of disfiguring way.
Oh wow, that's very very out there. So why Top Gun specifically?
Oh, just because I think that Tom Cruise right now in America is a very good stand-in for white supremacy. This like milk-fed, I'm a white guy, but yet I managed to have a chip in my shoulder. Like, no, like no. So I think he's a good stand-in right now for just everything that is and has been wrong with America. So I think a bunch of lesbian vampires should like get on that.
Awesome, love it already. Can't wait. Is it also going to be with Fisher-Price figurine?
I'm wondering how I'll do it. I think I'm going to need to like make some sort of bendable puppet with more articulated limbs to do this, because I want to feel the crush. You know what I mean? I want to feel his head under the crush. So I'm gonna need something. I'm sure I'll make up some sort of puppet for it.
Yeah. This took a turn that I was not expecting, I have to say. Apart from this film, what else have you got planned then as a filmmaker? Because as I said, your body of work is amazing, and I encourage everyone to check out your website. We'll put the details of your website in the description of the Q&A. But yeah, what else have you got plans?
Well, in the vein of elder care and queer elder care, the story that I'm just finishing, just like this week, is when my mom broke her hip and had to go into the nursing home. I was cleaning out her apartment and I came across her big vibrator. And so the story is me finding this and then figuring out like how to get it to her. Should I get it to her? Should I make a harness so that it couldn't roll away because she has serious Parkinson's? So this idea of like, my mom is still a very sexual being. She's always been very positive, and now that she's in a nursing home, like, am I allowed, you know what I mean? What's the right thing to do for a daughter to get her mom a vibrator? And then when I decide, okay, I'm going to get it to her, just then I wasn't able to visit her because of COVID. So it's a story that's happening now, and it's a story that I don't know that any, you know, I think there needs to be more stories about queer people doing elder care. There's stories, there are now more and more stories about queer elders, but I don't know about in your family, but I know so many queer kids whose siblings have said, well, since you don't really have a life, you go take care of mom. Or, you know, I have kids, I'm busy with my jobs, you know, you go take care of dad. And I think it's really fallen and often to the queer kid to do that kind of elder care. So I'm kind of interested in that as a cultural phenomenon, and then so why not with the vibrator?
But I think that's brilliant, and because I mean I can totally see, because I'm a filmmaker and not an animator, but I can totally see it as a short film, and I'm sure it would be brilliant as an animation as well. I think it's really important, because a lot of the time there's such a stigma around older people and sexuality, because a lot of people think that if someone is past a certain age, then they're not a sexual being anymore, which is obviously completely wrong. And it would, I'm actually thinking about it in my head. I'm making the film for you in my head, so I'm just going to start.
I've been wanting to collaborate. Let's do it.
Yeah.
I'll send you the draft I have as a starting conversation.
Oh, yeah, please do. Yeah, I'd love to read it, absolutely. So, where are you based at the moment? Because I can hear some birds, and I'm not making it up, am I? There are some birds around where you are.
Yes, there are. Right now, I'm down on the shore. Friends of mine have invited me to come and stay with them, so to get a little break from the city of Philadelphia, which is 101 degrees today. So today I'm going to go to the beach later today.
Oh, lovely. And so Philadelphia is where you usually reside, is that right, you say?
Outside of Philadelphia, so like the rural edge of the Philly area.
Right. And so what is it like being queer then, where you are?
Well, in my town and with my mom, if there were any queer people, they all moved to New York or San Francisco or Philadelphia. So where I actually live and work, I am the only queer person that I identify. Like, I mean, there might be queer people that haven't, identified themselves to me, but to my eye, I'm the only gender nonconforming and queer person around. So it's been a project. There's also the piece of that I work with disabled children, and there's a piece that still exists, down where I'm from, where gay equals pedophile. So there's had to be a lot of, very hard conversations and awkwardness, and also some real very unpleasant interactions with that. Another thing I think about queer film is it's often based in the city. I mean, I think that I'm happy to see, these. In any case, answering your question, it's hard to be, a gender nonconforming person down there. I've been beaten for being, a gender nonconforming person, but it's also been an opportunity for people. I mean, I'm from there. They can't kick me out, and they see that like I'm a good person. I'm happy. If they need me to pick up their cigarettes or vodka, I'll go do it. So over time, they've seen that I'm actually kind of an okay person. I'm a good time. I'll buy a round of beer for everybody. Like, So that's kind of been a political project to just stay where I'm at and be who I am, where I'm from.
Absolutely, because I mean, where I live, which is Brighton in the UK, we are in such a bubble where you can literally be anything you want to be. I mean, there is such a high, we're as queer people, I think it's the best place to be for queer people in the UK, and it's really easy to forget that in most parts of the world it's really not, and there's still so much to do. And as you said, a lot of the time it's out of fear, isn't it? And if you show people that actually you're a nice person, then that's a good start.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you for obviously for being yourself on behalf of the whole queer community, for being a positive person for us. And so, in terms of filmmakers and animators, what would be your advice to the next generation of budding animators out there?
I really thought about this a lot, and I think that what I've come up with is that as a white American, in Lenapehoking, that the area that was lived for thousands of years and still lived by people, ancestral people, the Lenape people here, maybe my advice to filmmakers would be to teach people who haven't had access to filmmaking technologies, to teach someone who hasn't been there. I almost wonder if my place as a white person in America is to be quiet and to not be taking up space and to not be doing to trying to make things okay, because in America things are bad, things have been bad, and now there's enough political will right now to maybe change things for the better. So I think advice, whatever, if I was a 20-something-year-old white American filmmaker, I would try to find people, of African descent, people of color, and see how I could support their work and see what I could do to support those voices, getting more into circulation and having, white people, step aside and in support of having stories that need to be told, be more prominent in production, in curating, in selecting films and making and being in films.
Yeah, that's very true. And I mean, hopefully, living in the UK, we have to trust the news that we read, but Twitter has proven to be quite a good source of information for what's been going on in the States with Black Lives Matter and everything. And hopefully, we're starting to see a shift. I want to believe that it's what's happening and it's not just a trend or whatever. I think hopefully things are beginning to change for the better. We've still got a long way to go, but is that your impression? Obviously, you're there, you're in the thick of it. Do you feel that it's changing for the better? There's some hope there.
I see people using words like abolition and reparation and defund the police that have never ever thought about those terms. So just from this point this year to the beginning of January, the political consciousness about what's possible has really changed. And that's very, very exciting. I think that if we can keep pressure on, that political will turn it into material change. And I want that with all of my heart, and I hope it happens.
Yeah, me too, absolutely. Well, thanks so much for being with us today, Chrissy. It's been great talking to you. And we look forward to seeing your future projects.
Thank you. I'm very proud to be included. So thank you for including me. And please congratulate everyone involved in putting this together. I really appreciate it.
I will do. And thank you as well for being part of it. Thanks, Chrissy.